provides families and businesses with financial insights, offering free online, on-site, and on-air B-Warp presentations. The Black Wealth Attainment and Retention Programs helps our community acquire, sustain, and pass down legacy wealth. High school seniors can apply for this year's scholarship awards at parksideedc.org. Scholarships will be awarded at Parkside EDC's Gospel/Jazz Brunch on Sunday, April the 27th. For details, tickets, or donations, please visit parksideedc.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I want to begin today by first giving honor and praise to God for the privilege of being safe. After our interview yesterday with Mr. George Johnson of Afro Sheen Products, Afro Sheen Ultra Sheen, the producer of the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show and I decided to drive per our commitments to New York to spend time with Reverend Al Sharpton at the National Action Network Conference and Convention. What we hadn't paid attention to was the enormous storm that was blowing through the state of Ohio, from Chicago to Indiana, then to Ohio, and we found ourselves right in the middle of it. Wind gusts of up to 80 miles an hour. We drove past collapsed semi-trucks on the side of the road, upside down, flipped over, cars that had clearly been tossed about. We decided to pull over, stop, Youngstown, Ohio. Rose this morning just to see nothing but carnage down Interstate 80. This morning and this afternoon, working our way to New York, a number of detours and bypasses on the New Jersey Turnpike have us today at Tap House 15 in Wharton, New Jersey. So I want to apologize to our listeners because of the quality of sound that we demand for ourselves, and certainly KBLA demands of us. But thanking all of you for your understanding that we are just grateful to God to be here today. With that said, today would have been the 57th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s final speech. Before I introduce our very special guest, I want to play that 3-minute clip.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
At the moment that Dr. King concluded that speech, he had less than 24 hours to live. Our very special guest who will come forward the balance of the program is Dr. Johnny Mack, whom I will introduce when we return. Dr. Mack was tasked by Coretta Scott King with, one, keeping his legacy alive, the World House Project, working with Claiborne, Carson, and others on the King Papers Project. When we come forward, I will give a more comprehensive introduction of Dr. Mack, because we have to ask him a fundamental question. Where do we go from here? What would Dr. King ask of us in the current context? And what should we do next? I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, Dr. Johnny Mack.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580. Before the fire, Altadena was a real-life Wakanda. A thriving black oasis just 15 miles from downtown Los Angeles. 80% black residents were homeowners, building intergenerational wealth against the odds. It was a hub of black-owned businesses, churches, and cultural institutions. It stood as a symbol of black resilience and economic independence. Then, in a matter of hours, it was gone. The fire tore through homes, swallowed businesses, and left behind a painful void. But was it just an unstoppable act of nature, or was negligence involved? Did officials ignore early warning signs? Were the response efforts delayed or insufficient? What role, if any, did corporate or government failures play? Survivors are demanding answers. Don't miss our KBLA Talk 1580 Town Hall. The Eden Altadena Fire, 100 days and counting, on Wednesday, April 16th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Robinson Park Recreation Center, 1081 North Fair Oaks in Pasadena. Join Dominic DePrima, Nee Cordelai Corte, James Farr, Tavis Smiley, and a panel of survivors, community leaders, and experts as we commemorate Day 100 since the wildfires flared up, and we discuss where we go from here. It's KBLA's Eden Altadena Fire, 100 Days and Counting Town Hall, Wednesday, April 16th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Robinson Park Recreation Center in Pasadena. Light refreshments to follow. Admission is free, but sign-up is required at our KBLA1580.com website. This is a community call to action, brought to you by KBLA Talk 1580 and Quinn Emanuel Trial Lawyers. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
The IRS finally caught up with Louis.
I hadn't paid my taxes in 8 years. I owe the IRS a lot of money.
Louis was in deep trouble.
We're going to take your house, put a lien on your bank account, garnish your pay. They don't care. They're going to take your paycheck.
Louis found out about Optima Tax Relief, the leading tax resolution firm. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, they've resolved over $1 billion for their clients.
Optima Tax, they help me. They calm me down. They make me feel comfortable, and I trust them.
Louis has a lot to be thankful for.
I don't owe the IRS anymore, and I'm able to live a comfortable life, a lot better life. It was because of Optima Tax.
For tax help you can trust, call Optima now for a free consultation. Take it from Louis.
If you owe the IRS, don't go it alone. Give Optima Tax a call. They can help you.
Call 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077. 800-919-9077.
Optima Tax Relief.
Testimonial from an actual client. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Dr. Johnny Mack, founding director of the World House Project. The World House Project is a global initiative of individuals, organizations, and institutions committed to the ideals of the concept championed by Martin Luther King Jr., a world house where humanity lives together with dignity, liberty, and community. Dr. Mack co-founded the program with the former director of the King Papers Project, Dr. Clyburn Carson. Dr. Carson, who keeps Dr. King's papers at Stanford University. Dr. Carson at Stanford University, part of the Freeman Spogli Institute, where he researched, wrote, and taught on the subject. Today, the World House Project, Inc. operates as an independent international government organization through its flagship programs, the World House Global Network, the World House Global Institutes, and the World House Global Forum. His professional portfolio is extensive. But most importantly, at this particular hour, and I'll deal with his biography and his resume over the course of the program, Dr. Mack is a special advisor to Reverend Al Sharpton, both on domestic and international issues. He was hand-selected by Coretta Scott King to help forward Dr. King's vision of a global community. Dr. Johnny Mack, welcome to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Jesse, thank you. It really is my pleasure to be here with you, and I greatly appreciate the invitation.
Dr. Mack, we are commemorating the assassination tomorrow of Martin Luther King Jr., 57 years since his life was taken from us in Memphis, Tennessee. You've been tasked with something fairly extraordinary, and that is, by his widow, to keep his legacy and vision of a world house and a world community alive. Dr. Mack, share with us some of the difficulties that you confronted up against the backdrop of where we are as a nation and a world today, and your thoughts.
Well, Jesse, you've said quite a bit in your introduction and in your question. To be tasked by Coretta Scott King to do anything is really quite an exceptional honor and privilege, and she was quite an exceptional individual. My work, I think giving you this background might be helpful in contextualizing the answer to your question. My work began at the King Center, as you've noted, by the invitation of Mrs. King in the early 90s. And then I was the administration and finance director of the King Center and ended up spending about 6 years at the King Center, and then later working not only with Mrs. King for that period of time, but also with Dexter Scott King, who then took the reins of the King Center, you may recall, from his mother, and then eventually working directly with Martin King III, with whom I worked for a number of years, advising on both domestic and international issues and helping to organize a number of international initiatives, which are really quite profound and rewarding as an individual. I make that context because it led to other things that really brought together what I think helped me to understand what Dr. King was talking about when he speaks of the world house. So my work has taken me around the globe for the last quarter century, um, nearly 40 countries. And I have worked with a number of individuals and organizations who would be considered some of the most notables in the fields of peace and conflict, nonviolent social change, and human development, including not only members of the King family, but worked very closely with the Nelson Mandela family, the Desmond Tutu family, Mohandas K. Gandhi family. I can name several more. Again, Jesse, I mentioned this only to give context to answering your question. And particularly, I put that finally in the context of the work of Reverend Al Sharpton, whose convention, after 34 years, carrying the torch of nonviolent struggle, comes to 2025, and this convention's title of being a light in dark times. And that's where we are today. We think about in the mid 20th century, the modern civil rights movement, those are very dark times. These times, I thought, would not rival the mid 20th century challenges, but they have, and even beyond. And so, what I've experienced, in short, in my work is, the challenges and opportunities that confront us as a people, both as African Americans, but people writ large in the global community.
One of the one of the names, obviously, that I want to uplift at this hour is the leadership of Reverend Sharpton. Given the extraordinary times that we find ourselves in, he's had leaders from all across the country, both elected officials and unelected leaders. Don Lemon, Jamal Bryant, Mayor Eric Adams, members of Congress over the next couple of days will be coming to the National Action Network to discuss critical strategies that in large measure were begun when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4th. You were largely tasked by Mrs. King, recognizing her own finitude, with advancing that work. Can you share with our listeners the importance of Dr. Sharpton's work at this critical hour?
Really a good question, of course. As I mentioned before, Reverend Sharpton has largely taken that torch, beginning himself in the early 90s, to carry that torch. And he's been relentless, indefatigable in his efforts to seek freedom, justice, and equality, particularly for African Americans in the context of the modern civil rights movement. His importance today cannot be overstated. He is, in my point of view, arguably the most important voice and holds the most important platform in advancing the interests and the ideals of nonviolent social change, justice, and equality for all. And so again, his importance cannot be overstated, nor the 100 chapter organization that he founded called the National Action Network.
The reason I want to emphasize not only his name and his work in light of what we know occurred and the devastation that it represented for our organizing efforts 57 years ago, with less than 24 hours to live, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., and obviously the debilitating health of my own father, Reverend Sharpton recognizes that 100 chapters, 50 different states and thousands of different cities and thousands of different counties across the country allows us to organize not only socially and not only in crisis mode, but in between election cycles for the purposes of maintaining and protecting our gains, which are so threatened at this hour. Dr. Mack, you are well aware of Donald Trump's most recent executive order to single out the Museum of African American History and the contextualization of the African American experience. And most recently, within the last 24 hours, the director of that museum has taken a leave of absence. I heard Reverend Sharpton speaking earlier today at the conference by way of the internet, and he kept contextualizing the significance of our history in this struggle. We have about 8 minutes before the break. Share with us your thoughts about the importance of that contextualization.
Well, what is happening with this second term of Donald J. Trump is quite remarkable, but shouldn't surprise any of us. The context, I think, reaches back much further than Donald Trump. It reaches back at a time when those who had a problem in the early to mid 20th century with the idea that African Americans should be part of the mainstream of this experiment, this project of the American dream, seeking to keep African Americans out of that framework, out of that context, out of enjoying the riches and the privileges and the ideals of what we now call the United States of America, and not living up, as King would say, to the true meaning of its creed, as was documented in its most important documents, including its Constitution. So what we see in Trump today and his administration is a continuing effort to marginalize African Americans and what we some call people of color, and to maintain this country as a country for the privileged and the few. We often think, or some often argue, that that's strictly for a particular group of people, and maybe so, a particular ethnic group, and maybe so. But I think emphasizing this idea of privilege is important here, the privileged. And so I think that this new world order, which is really where I was going when I mentioned the early 20th to the mid 20th century, the idea that there would be a new world order. Jesse, people anticipated that at some point, this idea of democracy would run its course. Remember now that democracy is about the majority ruling. And that works well for the majority as long as that group is in the majority. But if at some point that group which is in the majority suddenly becomes the minority, then democracy doesn't look so good, does it? If one cannot mandate through their numbers what that order, that social order would be. So I think that that's what we're experiencing today, Jesse. Democracy was all right so long as the group that was in charge, that had the numbers, controlled the national agenda. And I think now, with the numbers changing, it's a whole different story.
Dr. Mack, when we look at the general direction of the tide that is churning, or the worm that is churning in our society and throughout our world, the rise of the oligarchs and the billionaire class and authoritarianism, Dr. King's vision for a world house stands in stark contrast to the kind of isolationist, white supremacist vision that we are seeing so dominated not only in the news, but in technocracy, in the financial sectors of our country, and the willingness of corporations to go along, to get along, and a Justice Department that seems at this hour to be completely ineffective in protecting the basic human rights of people. Your thoughts on Dr. King's idea that the World House was the antithesis of the present vision?
Well, absolutely. Of course, the World House comes from the last book published before his assassination, where in that book, of course, being Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, in that chapter where he talks about the world house. And King envisions that the world is like a great big house where we must all learn to live together as brothers and I'll add sisters here. Or he said we would perish as fools. And so we've come to that time when King gave his final speech, as you showed at the outset of this show, that we have difficult days ahead. He anticipated in ways that are so prescient that what we are calling dark days, King called difficult days. I don't know that King thought that they would be as difficult as they are, perhaps so. But that's the context. And so the World House is about how we as a people getting to the promised land means we as a people can take charge of our lives and the lives of our communities and not leave our fate to others, to have a small group of individuals whose narrow-mindedness and selfishness and greed would exclude us from enjoying, what the world has to offer. And that's really the challenge that we have today. And that's what King was arguing, that we must learn to live together in this world house.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. My very special guest is Dr. Johnny Mack. He's been tasked with a nearly impossible task to follow up on the work of Martin Luther King Jr. by the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Coretta Scott King. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, Johnny Mack, historian and activist, will continue to be our guest.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. President Trump's new tariffs could hit Black households hard. A Yale University study shows low-income families, many of them Black, will see a drop in disposable income as prices rise on food, clothes, energy, and electronics. Hundreds rallied in Richmond, Virginia for the Virginia March for Life, urging lawmakers to oppose abortion. Black Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears spoke at the event as Republicans pushed back on efforts to protect abortion rights in the state constitution. J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris are leading picks for 2028, according to a new poll. Vance tops Republicans, while Harris leads among Democrats as their ideal candidate. Both are seen as early frontrunners by their parties. And looking back on today in history, in 1944, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that barring blacks from voting in the Texas Democratic primaries violated the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Since the dawn of baseball, countless players have heard the call of destiny. Witness the heroes of the game in ballparks nationwide. Get your tickets today at MLB.com/tickets. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The awards continue to add up for USC women's basketball star Juju Watkins. Thursday morning, the sophomore from Compton was named the Associated Press Player of the Year. Watkins was almost a unanimous selection. She received 29 of the 31 votes from a panel of media members. Watkins is only the 4th sophomore to win the honor since AP created the award in 1995. Watkins has had a major impact on the USC program in just 2 years. Before she arrived on the USC campus in 2023, the average attendance at the Galen Center was just over 1,000. Average attendance for home games this season was 5,932. The Lakers play Golden State tonight at Crypto.com. Important game for both teams. The Lakers are 3rd in the Western Conference. Golden State is 5th. Both teams are trying to stay among the top 6 to automatically qualify for the playoffs. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like your style, though.
Are you having trouble hearing? Hearing loss can devastate the quality of your life. Now, there's an affordable fix for you or your loved one. Rated the best hearing aids of 2025 by Forbes Health, Audion Hearing has the highest quality hearing aids at the lowest prices, just $189.
I actually like them better than my old $5,000 hearing aids.
I could not believe how my hearing and life changed.
Join over 1 million happy customers by going to audionhearing.com. That's AUDIEN hearing.com.
Listen up, fellow Gen Xers. Elizabeth Banks here. The recommended age for pneumococcal pneumonia vaccination has been lowered to 50 and older, even if you're healthy. It's up to us to lead the way. We've done this before. Music videos, fanny packs, even the World Wide Web. Let's do it again and get vaccinated, because we're at over 6 times greater risk for pneumococcal pneumonia. Gen X, this is our shot. Visit vaxassist.com and schedule a vaccine today. Sponsored by Pfizer.
Texting privacy policy and terms and conditions posted at textplan.us. Texting enrolls for recurring automated text marketing messages. Message and data rates may apply. Reply stop, opt out. Individual results may vary. Consult a doctor prior to use.
You've lost so much weight. How'd you do it? I got medical treatment for weight loss through Zelty and lost 50 pounds. I struggled for the longest time, but Zelty makes it easy and affordable to get weight loss treatment 100% online. Zelty providers can prescribe FDA-approved weight loss medications clinically shown to help people lose weight, like Wegovy, Zepbound, and others. I've heard those medications can help you lose weight, but aren't they expensive? Zelty can help get the medication covered by insurance, so it's as little as $0 a month. What if you don't have insurance? No problem. Zelty may be able to help you get other GLP-1 medications for 80 to 90% off the price of name brand medications. I'm ready to start losing weight. How do I get started with Zelty? Just text.
Text SUNNY to 200-300 to get started today with Zelty and see if weight loss medications like Wegovy and Zepbound are right for you. Don't wait. Text now for a link to your exclusive offer. Text SUNNY to 200-300. That's SUNNY to 200-300. SUNNY to 200-300.
Robinhood Gold members can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on annual retirement contributions. With Robinhood Gold, the perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive a 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Dr. Johnny Mack, who has been tasked by Coretta Scott King with doing some extraordinary work in some extraordinarily difficult times to continue the vision of the World House that Dr. King laid out in his book, Chaos or Community. Before I do, I want to deviate for a second, Dr. Mack, because rarely do I put a commercial in the middle of my program. But the people at the Tap House 15 in Wharton, New Jersey, were so kind to host me today, given the difficult circumstances that I've gone through over the last 24 hours to get to the Sheraton Hotel and spend my time with you and Dr. Sharp. And I should be there about an hour after this program is over, by the way. But I want to thank them. I want to also put up their number, 862-437-1300, 862-437-1300. And I'd like some of my callers to just call them and say, thank you for hosting Congressman Jackson, for taking care of him and allowing him to share this this time with Dr. Johnny Mack. Dr. Mack, I do have a question for you. Aubrey Hendricks wrote in his book, The Politics of Jesus, that this dichotomy exists between the soft, sublime, innocent Jesus of Nazareth that the last 2,000 years has presented to the world. And on the other hand, there is this radicalized Christ who overturns money changers in the temple, who spends his time with prostitutes and thieves and murderers and the dispossessed, the locked out, the sanitation workers, the despised. We have this Dr. King for a new generation who is seemingly somewhere between Rip Van Winkle and dreaming. And then there is this task that has been given under these very difficult circumstances that Dr. King talked about on April 3rd in the context of the sanitation workers, in the context of an assassin's bullet just 24 hours later, and this vision of a world house that he himself was unable to complete. Can you share with our listeners your thoughts on what some have called the more radicalized king, the king who had grown weary of the possibilities that this American experiment could even work?
Again, a really good, a really good thought and question. Yes, King, of course, has been characterized as a dreamer. And a dreamer he was. His vision, however, was a radical vision. It was a vision that saw all humanity living together in peace and harmony. And we live quite differently from that today. And King understood that it would take not only a radical vision, but radical action. And so there is the militant King, and he was a militant nonviolentist, if I can use that term. King saw that it would take determination, it would take steadfast commitment, it would take sacrifice, it would take the collective solidarity of a people, it would take all of our resources, our collective community, so much of who we are and what we are, in order to make the kind of change that would realize what he called the beloved community. King understood that pacifism, accepting the insults and violence of others, and wishing and hoping and praying that somehow we would be able to convince their bitter hearts that such bitterness and heartlessness is not the way of a peaceful and just world, would be foolhardy. But rather, we had to put in place the institutional and structural and cultural frameworks. Those are very practical matters of how we organize, Jesse, society, right? If we depend solely on preaching and praying solely, now preaching and praying is important, and marching and protesting is important. But if we expect, King, I believe, would argue, to protest our way to the promised land, remember now, King did argue that nonviolence, in fact, nonviolent direct action, was the most powerful tool that African Americans had at that particular time. I wonder if he would argue that same thing today. That would he believe today that simply protesting or praying or preaching would change the hearts and minds of individuals and turn from their wicked ways to this just and peaceful, beloved community, or another metaphor of the world house? I don't think so, Jesse. I think King understood that we would have to roll up our sleeves, and that, yes, we would have to protest, we have to march, we have to pray, but we also would have to put in place the institutional frameworks and structures, the social and cultural and value-laden frameworks. Remember that King argued that what the world needed is a revolution. And that revolution, Jesse, is a revolution of values. And that raises the question, how then do you create a revolution of values as what he called peaceable power, not just to change the hearts and minds of women and men, but to change the very institutional frameworks that mediate how we interact with each other and with society itself. That's the challenge. And too many of us don't realize that that is our challenge, that the institution, the social edifice, King said, true compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is, he said, restructuring the edifice that produces the beggar. So how do we do that? Do we protest our way to restructuring? The edifice is the social structure itself. It is how we vote. It is what we do in our everyday work throughout life. It's how we engage at the local level with local government, not just with federal government, twice or every 2 years or every 4 years, but it's getting involved. And what John Lewis would say, getting in good trouble, to actually change the frameworks that determine who benefits from society structure and who is burdened by society structure. And that's why King said we must study nonviolence more carefully. And I would argue that very little of that study has taken place since he died. That we have relied upon and looked back on what he did rather than what we must do today. I'll make this final point because I know you have to go, Jesse. But when King first started his work, he and his team, they learned from Mohandas K. Gandhi. But they took Gandhi's idea of nonviolence and they did something very important. They re-articulated it, they restructured it for their specific circumstances and for that specific time. Jesse, that is what we must do today. We must think about nonviolence in today's terms with blockchain and AI and quantum computing. We have to think about how to use the principles and values of nonviolence in the context of today's realities and those tools of organizing society. Jesse, we're nowhere there. And that's the work we must do.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest has been and will be Dr. Johnny Mack for our final segment. I have a couple more questions of Dr. Mack. And of course, as usual, I'm going to ask Dr. Mack to end our program on a word of hope. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. This is the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580. What's that sound? That's the sound of Downy Unstoppable scent beads going into your washing machine and giving your clothes freshness that lasts all day long. There it is again. It's like music to your ears, or more like music to your nose. That freshness is irresistible. Let's get a Downy Unstoppables bottle shake. And now a sniff solo. Nice. With Downy Unstoppables, you just toss, wash, wow, for all-day freshness.
Olay Indulgent Moisture Body Wash.
It's me, Olay Indulgent Moisture Body Wash. I see those dry elbows, baby. But don't worry, get moisturized right in the shower. So hydrated, you can skip the lotion after.
Don't want to see it dry no more. Skin so moisturized with body wash.
Look at you now. No more dry skin. Your skin gets the moisture it craves with
Olay Indulgent Moisture Body Wash.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach, transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal, prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Thanks for calling Discover. This is Nia.
Hi, Nia. It's Jennifer. Did you know that Discover automatically doubles all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year?
Yeah, I work here.
Okay. I was just double checking. Get it?
Because Discover automatically doubles all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year?
Oh, you get me, Nia.
You could say that I double get you.
I guess we've taken it too far.
You earn, we match. Discover Cashback Match. See terms at discover.com/credit card.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest has been none other than Johnny Mack, Dr. Johnny Mack. Welcome back to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I want to go out on a limb here and then give the final 6 or so minutes to Dr. Mack, who I hope will consider becoming a regular contributor to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I want to go out on a limb. I asked my father one time, given his proximity to Dr. King, did he ever remember having a conversation with Dr. King about the Constitution? And Dad said, we talked about a lot of subjects. We talked about the Declaration of Independence. We talked about the Constitution and the hypocrisy of America, but not the specifics. I asked Andy Young the same thing, and when I raised this question with him, Ambassador Young, the Honorable Andrew Young, said, Jesse Jr., Dr. King would have definitely understood your work. When I wrote the book A More Perfect Union in 2001 with the late Frank Watkins, Reverend Al Sharpton was so impressed with the work that in large measure, when he ran for president in 2004, he used the book as the foundation of change. He said, we need to amend the Constitution in a number of areas to be consistent with Dr. King's domestic, and ultimately, as our democracy influences 134 other democracies around the world, they too should consider these basic human rights amendments added to their constitutions. The reason I raised this question, when I think about the history of Black people, and I'm going to leave you the final 6 minutes to answer that question and to provide us with some hope. Without the 13th Amendment, which the Negro was largely responsible, and the war for adding to the Constitution, ending chattel slavery, no one else has to go through that again. But then the 14th Amendment, the citizenship rights, the Equal Protection Clause, which lays the foundation for Brown versus the Board of Education, and then the 64 Civil Rights Act, the 65 Voting Rights Act, public accommodations legislation, all of Second Reconstruction tied to an interpretation of the Constitution. It seems to me that on the question of the World House, we have abandoned a constitutional struggle, not just a legislative struggle every 2 years, or the first Black to be the president, or the first Black woman to be the president, but the struggle for fundamental human rights that the Negro herself, is responsible for, including the 19th Amendment for other women, the 26th Amendment for 18-year-olds. Your thoughts on the structural adjustments necessary to save the American experiment, which, quite frankly, African American history is largely responsible for? That's my question. And then, Dr. Mack, after your answer, take your time and end for us on a word of hope.
Well, Jesse, again, thank you so much for this opportunity. You asked very pointed and challenging questions, and I hope I can rise to the occasion and give a meaningful answer. This last question is really quite important, of course, but of course, we are in what many people call a constitutional crisis. Constitution is only as good as the people demand it will be. You can write anything on paper. It is only paper. And in that last speech that you began the program with, King said as much, just do what you put on paper, King says in his speech. And so, yes, perhaps we should restructure the Constitution. But Jesse, we have to restructure something else. And that is, again, as I said earlier, the social order itself. And you think about what Cory Booker had to say in his epic stand in the last 24, 48 hours, speaking to this whole idea, the ideals of what it is to be what we call an American, keeping in mind that everybody who lives in the Americas are Americans. But that notwithstanding, what does it mean to be a citizen of the United States of America? What are the truths that we hold self-evident? And what is most important to us? The people determine that. It's not determined by the government, nor is it determined by the market, Jesse. It's determined by you and me and every other ordinary citizen who draws a line in the sand and says, we will go this far and no further, that holds accountable those whom we elect to lead us. And so while I do agree that there are certain amendments and adjustments to what we put on paper and call a constitution, how will we amend our hearts and our minds? How will that take place? What is the collective consciousness that must take place? And how do we arrive at that collective consciousness so that what we put on paper and call a constitution holds? Now, to your point of, please go ahead.
I can't improve upon that answer, but while the 13th Amendment is on paper, the hearts and minds of the American people and the war itself, to keep the nation's hearts and minds from sliding backwards, had to be enshrined in the document. The hearts and minds of the people that we belong and deserve equal protection of the laws. It ended up on paper, but it took a long journey for the idea of equal protection of the laws. If we believe in health care, I'm not talking about Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. I'm talking about health care as a constitutional human right for all Americans. And the struggle is so difficult to put it in the Constitution that we can't help but change our hearts and minds to get it there. So it's the process that we must undertake. With that said, Dr. Mack, you're going to be a regular contributor on my show. So I'm not even worried about this conversation is going to go on and on and on.
Yes.
But your experience is so vast and so deeply respected, richly researched, and your commitment is unassailable. People need hope at this hour. We have about 4.5, 5 minutes left in our program. Where's the hope? Where can we find hope?
Well, I think we can find hope in several places. Obviously, the example of Dr. King, who this day represents, is paramount. We should never forget it. We should stand on that example and that sacrifice that King made, and so many others, including your dad, who worked with Dr. King. But we can't leave it there. Looking backwards is important. If we forget our history, we're doomed to repeat it, the wise sage once said. But then we must act, Jesse. Again, the Constitution is only as good as we insist upon it. And so what is the hope? The hope is in ourselves. It's in our commitment and our determination that we will have, or determination on what kind of country, what type of nation we want to be. Will we be that shining light on a hill, as we once called ourselves? Or will we be something else? Will we hold true to those things that made the country or at least we aspired the country to be, and so they argue.
We have some
In terms of
buffering
hope
issues.
in ourselves, I'm sorry.
No, please continue, sir.
So in terms of that hope, finally, I am reminded of something I often say when asked a question similar to this. And that is the following, Jesse. Nothing splendid has ever been achieved except by those who would dare believe that something inside themselves is superior to circumstances. I'm going to repeat that, Jesse. This is about hope. Nothing splendid, nothing hopeful has ever been achieved except by those who would dare believe that something inside themselves was superior to the circumstances that they faced. And so we have to believe in ourselves. The hope is in our own hearts and minds. If we would only kindle it, if we would only set it afire and let it glow. And Jesse, I would add this. Choosing the easy course is treason to the soul. And so it's so easy. It's so easy to take the easy way out. But not only is that treason to our individual souls, it's treason to the collective soul of what it means to be human. And that's why it was often said that African Americans could redeem the soul of America because we experienced something that many others had not experienced through our slave experience, through Jim Crow, through so many forms of exclusion and marginalization. Can we carry that spirit through the rest of this century? Can we be the example? Can we be the collective kings and demonstrate to ourselves and to the world what this world house can actually be? I think that if the statement is true, that nothing splendid has ever been achieved except by those who dare believe that something inside themselves is superior to circumstances, we can embrace that truth and we can realize the hope in the world house.
I feel in this moment, Dr. Mack, with the profundity of your remarks, that there's a 25-hour speech in every one of us. we just have to find the platform to stand on and tell our story, to tell it as broadly, as proudly, as loudly, as clearly as we possibly can. Dr. Johnny Mack, I can't thank you enough for being on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. You're my great friend, and I'm certainly grateful for this moment. I'm sure our listeners are extraordinarily enriched as a result of this time with you, and I hope, again, you will be a regular contributor of our show. And let me just conclude on this. We are a better place and a better world because Mrs. Coretta Scott King trusted you. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Thank you, Johnny Mack.
Thank you.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.